My name is Lila, and this isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about what happens when the quiet woman in the background finally takes back her power. The day my husband proposed to another woman wasn't the day my world fell apart. It was the day I took back everything he'd ever tried to take from me. I woke up that morning with this feeling I hadn't had in a long time: hope. After 14 years of marriage, you learn that love isn't a fairy tale, it's work. So I was putting in the work. I stopped at this tiny, beautiful flower shop and bought a huge bouquet of roses, the dramatic, old-school kind Leo always said he loved, and I tucked 2 first-class tickets to Paris inside a handwritten card. It was for 4 nights at a little boutique hotel near Saint-Germain, the same neighborhood where we'd spent our honeymoon. That was back before the suits were tailor-made, and the watches cost more than my first car. Back before his name, Leo Carter, started showing up in business magazines. Back before he was the kind of man who made a room go quiet just by walking into it. I had this whole picture in my head of how I'd surprise him. By noon, I was watching him kiss another woman. At 11:42 a.m., I walked into the lobby of Axiom Digital, the company I had co-founded from nothing. It was all glass and sunlight and those trendy living green walls. It was so impressive you'd never guess it all started in a cramped little office above a dentist in Stamford. The receptionist barely looked up from her screen. "You here for the party?" she asked, all cheerful. I just smiled. I figured Leo had planned some big Valentine's Day thing for the office. He was always good at grand gestures, the kind everyone could see. "I guess I am," I smiled back, and she pointed me toward the main atrium. I heard the clapping before I saw the crowd. There had to be at least 200 people gathered under this huge glass skylight. They were all clustered around a small stage decorated with white roses and gold balloons. Someone was playing a violin, and standing on that stage was Chloe Vance, the CEO Leo had hired about 18 months ago. I'd met her once, briefly, at some charity thing. She was brilliant, stunning, and a good decade younger than me, with this sharp blonde bob and an effortless confidence that made you feel like she was born to run the world. And Leo was standing right beside her. He had that big, practiced smile on his face, the one he used for cameras. Then he dropped to one knee. The room erupted. My brain just stopped. For a split second, it refused to process what I was seeing. I told myself it had to be a joke. Some bizarre company skit for morale. But then Chloe covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears, and Leo opened a little velvet box. The diamond inside caught the light, and my God, it was the exact cut I'd told him I loved years ago. She nodded, and the crowd went wild. He slid the ring onto her finger, stood up, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. And it wasn't a quick, nervous peck. He kissed her like he'd practiced it, like he'd already betrayed me 1,000 times in his head, and this was just the finale. I felt the flowers in my hand dip lower. A woman standing near me whispered to her friend, "Aren't they perfect together?" Perfect. That one word was like a slap in the face. It was so sharp that it made Leo finally turn. His eyes scanned the crowd, and then they locked with mine. In that half-second, all the noise, all the applause, it all just seemed to fold in on itself and disappear. His smile evaporated. The color drained from his face. He knew. He knew I saw everything. And still he didn't move. He didn't say my name. He didn't take a single step off that stage toward me. Chloe noticed his expression and followed his gaze, her eyes landing on me with a look of polite confusion. The kind of look you give a stranger who seems out of place. She mouthed, almost kindly, "Do we know each other?" And that's when the last piece clicked into place. Leo hadn't just cheated on me. He had erased me. I turned and walked away before my composure could shatter in front of 200 strangers. As I passed the reception desk, the same cheerful girl smiled at me. "Have a great Valentine's Day." I made it all the way to the parking garage before my hands started to shake. I just sat there in my car, the beautiful flowers wilting on the passenger seat, the Paris tickets in my lap, listening to the ghost of applause still ringing in my ears. I could have gone back in there. I could have screamed, cried, thrown those roses right at his face, and made a scene. But sometimes, when rage gets that pure, it gets quiet. It gets cold. And it gets clear. I picked up my phone. First, I canceled Paris. Then, I called the bank and put an immediate freeze on every single joint account we had. Next, I called our lawyer, David Sterling. He'd been my father's lawyer before he was ours. Lila, he said, his voice instantly sharp with concern. What's wrong? My husband just got engaged. I told him, my voice steady, to his CEO. There was a silence on the line, so total I could hear him take a breath. Then, he said, I'm on my way to the office. No, I said. Start with the holding company. Another pause. He knew exactly what that meant. Lila, are you sure? I glanced out the windshield, half expecting to see Leo bursting through the garage doors, ready with 1,000 apologies. He never came. Yes, I said, my voice like ice. Withdrawing the full position. Lila, that will trigger a capital event. It could freeze their entire line of credit. It could collapse the pending acquisition. David. I pressed my thumb into the corner of the Paris envelope until the paper cut into my skin. Do it. By the time I drove home, the calls had already started. 1 from Leo. Then 2. Then 50. By the time I pulled into our driveway, he had called 152 times. Now he was on our front porch, leaning on the doorbell like a man trying to raise the dead. And by the way, if you're still with me right now, and you can believe this story is only getting started, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this ends. I stood in the hallway of our house, my coat still on, the dead flowers lying on the kitchen island like a funeral arrangement. Lila, please open the door. Leo's voice was muffled, cracking. I looked at my phone. His face, smiling from the deck of our first house, lit up the screen again. Before the ambition in his eyes had hardened into entitlement. I let it ring. I walked to the door and peered through the little side window. He was still in his suit, but his tie was crooked, his hair a mess. For the first time all day, he looked like a man who was finally realizing that consequences can move a lot faster than excuses. I opened the door just a crack. Lila, he whispered, his voice desperate. It's not what it looked like. I just stared at him. I almost laughed. Even now, he thought the affair was the problem. He had no idea his entire empire was already on fire behind him. Then tell me, I said, my voice dangerously calm. What, exactly, did it look like? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And right then his phone started ringing. He glanced down and whatever name he saw on that screen made his face completely collapse. The board had found out. It was satisfying to watch. Not loud, messy revenge. Quiet. Like the click of a lock on a door that's been left open for too long. Lila, he begged, trying to step inside. We need to talk. No, his eyes darted to the street. This was a town where people pretended not to notice anything, while noticing everything. Being seen begging on his own porch didn't fit the Leo Carter brand. I made a mistake, he pleaded. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk, I said. Proposing to another woman in front of your entire company is not a mistake. It's a choice. His jaw tightened. It got out of hand. That was his talent. He could make any catastrophe sound like a weather event. Something that just happened to him. When did it get out of hand? I asked. Before or after you bought the ring? His phone buzzed again. He tried to hide the screen, but I saw it. David Sterling. My lawyer. Leo saw that I'd seen it. What did you do? He whispered, the panic in his eyes turning sharp. I leaned against the doorframe, my hands finally steady. I protected what's mine. The panic shifted to calculation. Lila, you can't just pull the capital. There are procedures, obligations. There are clauses. I corrected him. Clauses you signed. He stared at me like I was a stranger. 14 years ago, when Axiom Digital was just an idea and a folding table, I was the one who designed the software architecture. He could sell the dream. I could build the thing he was selling. My father was our first investor, not because he trusted Leo, but because he trusted me. After Dad died, his shares moved into a family holding company that eventually grew to control 83% of Axiom, worth over $500 million. Leo knew this. He just never respected it. He convinced me to stay behind the scenes, telling me, investors feel more comfortable with a single voice. He let the magazines call him the founder. And I let him, because I told myself a marriage wasn't a competition. You're angry, he said, trying to soften his voice. I get it. No, I said. What I don't get is how my husband was living as a single man at work. He flinched. Good. Chloe didn't know. That actually surprised me. She didn't know what? He looked away. About us. Not really. I told her we were separated. The lie was so cold, so absolute, it stole my breath. I thought of Chloe's confused face. Do we know each other? She wasn't being cruel. She was genuinely clueless. You told her we were separated. I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. While you slept in my bed every night. While I hosted your mother for Thanksgiving. While you kissed me goodbye this morning. He finally looked at me, and for a split second, I saw the old Leo, the one who used to hate disappointing me. But fear swallowed him whole. The board is overreacting. This can all be managed. Not fixed. Managed. I stepped back and picked up the Paris tickets from the hall table. These were for us, I said softly. I thought you were just stressed. I thought we just needed to reconnect. It's complicated, he mumbled. No, I said. Software is complicated. Lying is simple. His phone buzzed again. Mine did, too. A text from David. * emergency board meeting at 7:30. Video link to follow. Do not speak to Leo about corporate matters. * I showed him the screen. His face went white. Lila, don't do this tonight. I didn't do this, I said. You did. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking every one of his 46 years. If I'm removed, people lose their jobs. Good people, that's the first honest thing you've said all day, I replied. And it should have mattered to you before you turned their workplace into your engagement party. He had no answer. Does Chloe know now? I asked. His silence was the only answer I needed. Then go, I said. Go explain it to her. Lila, please. He reached for me. Are you divorcing me? The word felt less like a tragedy and more like a final piece of paperwork. Yes, I said. His face crumpled, but the fear returned faster. And the company? I looked at him, the man I had loved, the man who had built a life on my trust and then shattered it. The company, I said, letting him see the steel in my eyes, was never yours to lose. Then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and listened as he knocked once, twice, then stopped. A minute later, I heard his car door slammed shut. Through the window, I saw him just sitting there, head in his hands, a king who had just realized his castle was made of sand. That evening, the board terminated Leo for cause. The next day, Chloe Vance asked to meet me in person. We met at a quiet coffee shop, far from anyone who would recognize us. She showed up without makeup, her hair pulled back. The diamond ring was gone. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice shaking. I believed him. He told me he'd been separated for 2 years, that the divorce was just tied up in paperwork. He even showed me a lease for an apartment downtown. An apartment. He hadn't just told a lie. He had built a stage for it. He'd rented an entire apartment just to have proof. He made me feel chosen, she whispered, and that, more than anything, resonated with a painful, familiar ache. Leo always knew how to make you feel like you were the only person in the world. I looked at this woman, who wasn't a monster, but just another person standing in the wreckage of Leo's lies. He lied to both of us, Chloe, I said. But he married me. His first duty was to me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. A year later, I was the executive chair of Axiom Digital. Chloe was the CEO, a role she deserved and had earned. The company was more stable and more honest than ever. I never got the dramatic, screaming match I thought I wanted. Justice, it turns out, is mostly paperwork and quiet, final decisions. Leo lost his career, his reputation, and his marriage, not in one explosive moment, but in 1,000 small, selfish choices he made over the years. He sent me a letter once. He was working a quiet job in Vermont. He apologized, not for getting caught, but for believing his success gave him the right to be a liar. He ended it with, "I hope one day I become someone worthy of the forgiveness I asked for." I put the letter away. Peace didn't come from his apology. Peace came when I finally took that solo trip to Paris, stood on a bridge over the Seine, and made a promise to myself to never again confuse being needed with being valued. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I finally remembered that my worth was never up for his approval. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to destroy the person who broke you, but to refuse to let them stop you from becoming the person you were always meant to be. So, I have to ask you, what would you have done? Would you have burned it all down? Or would you have played the long game like I did? I won because I finally remembered that my worth had never depended on whether someone else recognized it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's refusing to let their choices destroy the person you were always meant to become. If this story resonated with you, I really want to hear from you. What would you have done in Emma's place? Would you have made the same choices or taken a completely different path? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're someone who connects with stories about betrayal, justice, resilience, and starting over, please subscribe and come back for the next one. Every story we share here is worth staying for.